The movie begins with John Oldman, a college history professor, packing his truck with moving boxes at his secluded southwestern home. However, his departure is disrupted by a sudden visit from his colleagues, eager to bid him farewell. Then we are introduced to John's colleagues, the lively biologist Harry, the insightful anthropologist Dan, the devout art history professor Edith, the infatuated historian Sandy, and the midlife crisis-ridden archaeologist Art. The group comes bearing food and drinks for a farewell party. Despite being John's friends for the past decade, they are hurt by his sudden departure without a proper goodbye. John apologizes for his haste, explaining his aversion to lengthy goodbyes. He invites his colleagues into his almost emptied house, and they begin to question his sudden departure. He brushes off their concerns with the excuse of having an itchy feeling, but his friends are very skeptical. Despite John's reassurances, Dan and Harry suspect that he might be facing legal problems. John, who's always been the subject of Harry's teasing, and Dan's deep curiosity and the gentle prodding of his colleagues, finally gives in and decides to reveal the truth to them. But he knows full well that they might not believe a word of it. Earlier, Edith had stumbled upon a seemingly genuine Van Gogh piece carelessly thrown in the back of John's truck, while Dan had discovered a prehistoric tool in John's house dating back to the Magdalenian prehistory. John explains to Edith that the Van Gogh painting was gifted to him by Vincent van Gogh himself, and he tells Dan that the prehistoric artifact was merely a lucky find in a thrift store, but he is old enough to have actually used it. As John recounts his story to the group, their curiosity turns into genuine concern for his mental well-being. He claims to be a 14,000-year-old man from the Magdalenian era, and even mentions having known the artist who created the famous prehistoric cave paintings of Lascaux in ancient France. The group, consisting of an anthropologist, an archaeologist, a historian, and a biologist, is torn between disbelief, dismay, and a hint of anger. With their varied expertise in the fields of study, they naturally begin to raise questions and probe deeper into John's extraordinary claims. And they are at a loss trying to figure out what to make of all this revelation. Are they dealing with a detailed psychotic break, or is John merely playing with their minds by answering questions that test the limits of their expertise? However, there is something undeniably compelling about the way John answers their questions. His calm demeanor and unwavering clarity only add to his credibility. As the conversation progresses, John's answers ring more and more true. When asked about his memories from his days as a caveman, John explains that his knowledge grew as humanity's collective knowledge expanded. Many of the terms and concepts commonly used to describe prehistory today simply did not exist in his time. His memories from his past life are like a hazy recollection, similar to a child's memories before they learn to talk or read. One thing he was acutely aware of was that he was different from everyone else around him. As others in his tribe grew and aged and died, he remained unchanged. John estimates that he stopped aging around the age of 35, give or take, because there were no calendars in his day. For his own safety, he was forced to leave his own tribe, who believed him to be an energy vampire, draining their lives to extend his own. One of John's guests excitedly declares the origin of the vampire myth, and Harry and Dan find John's answers about his past intriguing and playful, although they remain doubtful of the truth. The suspicion of John's abilities grow, with Harry testing his reflexes by attempting to ambush him from behind. But in a split second, John swiftly tosses Harry onto his back. John stresses that he's not a superhero, he's just a regular man with 14,000 years of honing his skills. Harry suggests that John's longevity may be due to a genetic mutation that allows his cells to perfectly renew without the normal deterioration associated with aging. Meanwhile, Dan finds the idea of a 14,000-year-old man far-fetched, but not impossible. And in the meantime, Sandy observes John's tendency to sit close to the fireplace and says that it's a habit he's carried over from his days as a primitive man, and he can't seem to break it. If he lived for 14,000 years, I wonder what his body count is. And as John's friend listen in awe, Art, the archaeologist, grows increasingly suspicious and indignant, feeling as if John is making a fool out of them with his very elaborate and unbelievable story. Besides, Edith also begins to feel very uneasy, as if John is playing with their emotions. Art retreats to make a phone call while the group contemplates a question that even John is afraid to answer, and the question being, has he himself ever been a famous figure in history? As Harry presses John for answers, he tries to dodge the question, asking nervously if they could move on to the next topic. However, Harry won't let him escape so easily and demands the truth. And with a heavy sigh, John begins to reveal his story of the time he spent in the Middle East over 2,000 years ago. John explains that he attempted to bring the teachings of the Buddha to a group of willing students. John's teachings didn't go as planned, as he quickly found himself at odds with the Roman government and the religious leaders. And Edith is shocked by the implications of what John is suggesting, that he was actually the historical figure known as, say it with me guys, Jesus! However, John quickly clarifies that the idea of being a savior was not his own, but a title given to him by others. In regards to the story of his resurrection, John reveals that he used meditation techniques learned in India to slow down his vital signs and fake his death. He clarifies that he was bound to the cross, not nailed, and was therefore not mortally wounded. After awakening in his tomb, John slipped away unnoticed, but he didn't realize that he was being watched. And meanwhile, Edith asks John if he picked up the name Jesus out of a hat, and John explains that his name has actually sounded like John, but was later translated to Yeshua, aka Joshua, which eventually became Jesus in Latin translations. The group is then visited by university psychologist Dr. Will, and he was called here by Art, who seemed a little concerned about his friend. Initially, Will humors John by playing along with his story and wonders how far John will go with his intricate delusions before admitting that it's a hoax. Will's investigation takes on personal dimensions, as he asks about John's past, including whether he was abandoned by his father, or if there's a deeper Freudian reason behind his elaborate tale. Then John reveals that he has no real memories of a father, and remembers a figure, possibly an older brother. As the night falls and the temperature drops, the group gathers around the fireplace for warmth. Edith repeatedly insists, "You are not Jesus," as she sees all this as an attack on her beliefs. Will then wonders what would happen if he shoots this immortal man. John tries to defuse the situation by stating that Will would be found guilty of murder, as he never claimed to be invulnerable. Before Will can act on his theory, he storms off in anger, and Harry quickly informs John that Will lost his wife to cancer the day before, which explains his disposition. John immediately rushes after Will, asking for his gun, worried that Will may be contemplating about joining his wife. Will, with a sigh of resignation, hands over his gun to John and drives away, feeling ashamed of letting his emotions get the better of him. Just as the tension reaches its peak, the light in the house flickers back on, and John reveals that it was all a carefully crafted hoax, a tale designed to entertain and challenge their collective expertise in the fields of anthropology, archaeology, biology, and history. This revelation leaves Edith in tears, and John humbly asks for their understanding and forgiveness. Despite being tricked, the bond amongst the friends is stronger than their anger, and they quickly forgive John. As the night comes to an end, John walks with them outside and assists with loading the remaining boxes in his truck. Before they depart, each member of the group embraces John and wishes him well on his journey ahead. Even Edith, with tears still in her eyes, forgives John in the spirit of Christianity. As the night falls and everyone else is left, Will feels very remorseful and drives back to John's house, seeking his forgiveness. The elderly psychologist, struggling with his health, takes a momentary respite from the nighttime cold by retreating inside. Meanwhile, John remained outside with Sandy, who's been secretly in love with John. She takes the opportunity to reveal her belief in his story and admiration for his wit. She mentions how she noticed that John has chosen a pun for his last name, John Oldman. As Will returns to the front of the door, he overhears their conversation and is struck by a new understanding of John's story. He trembles as he addresses John with newfound recognition. Will poses the question whether John is the same John Party who left behind his wife and young son in Boston many years ago. Nostalgically, Will recalls the memory of his father sporting a beard, which has since been shaved of course, and in a shocking revelation, John realizes that Dr. Will Gruber is none other than his long-lost son Willie, whom he abandoned decades ago. However, the reunion is short-lived as Will breaks down in tears and suffers a fatal heart attack. Despite Sandy's effort to call for help, the paramedics arrive too late, leaving John devastated as he experiences the death of one of his own children for the first time in 14,000 years. As his son's body is taken away, John packs his belongings and gets inside his truck, leaving Sandy standing alone in his driveway. Their future is uncertain, as John's immortality means he will outlive her and everyone, but he takes a chance and stops his truck, inviting her to come along. And so, with a glimmer of hope for their future, the two embark on a journey together, marking the end of the movie. I hope you guys liked our recap. Please leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. I will see you guys on the next recap. Bye.